People often ask me why YouTubers talk the way they do. Some speech patterns, like the intonation patterns I discussed in a recent video, are repetitive cliches similar to the ones you hear on TV. But some features of YouTube speech strike me as much more like mistakes. In fact, YouTubers seem to be getting these expressive features of English wrong in a way that's not only like non-native or L2 speech, but like synthetic AI speech. Given how amazingly lifelike AI voices are today, I sometimes can't tell whether a video sounds weird because the speaker's a YouTuber or a machine. So in this video, I'm going to look at what the weirdness is and why it happens. I don't really watch TV anymore, or rather what I watch on TV is YouTube. Of course, all platforms contain some rubbish, but on YouTube I'm constantly staggered by the diversity of fascinating content made by people who really care about their stuff and go into it far more deeply than was ever possible in the generalist world of old school TV. It's not just the diversity and specialism that make YouTube videos different from old TV. The style is typically different too, in how they sound and how they look. Let's first consider a visual example and how it arose, the jump cut. A jump cut in film and video editing is when you cut from one shot to the same shot, but with a time gap, so there's an instantaneous shift in the subject's position. You see this all over YouTube videos, most commonly when the shot is of someone talking to camera.
I have news, and I don't think you know about it. I think I managed to keep this a secret. I'm excited. And I'm excited to let you know about it right now. One of the things
Yeah, still a good laptop for that price. But now it's 2025 and it's got the M4 chip and the price has...
Oh my god, guys, thank you for 4 million subscribers. Okay, so if you haven't seen...
Something curves to the left when it's pushed to the left. But of course we know that every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
But you don't see this in traditional TV or in the dialogue scenes of conventional movies. And there's a reason that conventional TV and movie editors avoid jump cuts. It's because you never see anything like that in real life. If you're looking at something, it doesn't just instantaneously move slightly. The fascinating thing about film editing is that we have no problem with instantaneous cuts between different things, because that's similar to how we see the world. Try looking at 2 or 3 different things in the space you're in right now. You'll find that one moment you're looking at one thing, the next moment you're looking at something else. You don't really notice the time when your eyes are moving. Our perception, relatively speaking, is suspended. So traditional cutting between different things in a scene like this feels quite natural.
The plans will soon be back in our hands.
Whereas moving the camera from one thing to another feels jarring and draws your attention to it, because the camera registers the movements just as much as the static periods. We even feel quite comfortable cutting between 2 points of view when we couldn't possibly be in both camera positions. We're still cutting between Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, as our visual system would be if we were sitting at their table looking from one to the other. For decades, film and TV have avoided jump cuts except for getting specific effects.
Oh, Darren?
Cutting to a closer shot of the same thing could be a deliberate shock effect, as in these classic 1960s examples from Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick. And I think it's hard for young viewers today to experience the kind of disorientation induced in older audiences by the casual jump cutting in Jean-Luc Godard's radical 1960 film Breathless. So whenever an editor needs to make a cut in what someone is saying, the normal solution has always been to insert some other shot to cover the edit. Whenever an editor needs to make a cut in what someone is saying, the normal solution has always been to insert some other shot. Cliched examples in TV interviews include otherwise pointless shots of the speakers walking around, or noddies, that is, shots of the interviewer nodding, typically filmed when the interviewee isn't even there. The BBC actually had a scandal known as Noddygate, when a producer was accused of inserting himself nodding into interviews where he hadn't been present. So why is it that jump cuts are fine on YouTube? Well, before I answer that, I want to mention that this command line is a feature I've been using constantly since it was introduced into my favourite browser, Opera. I just type command or control / and that opens Aria, Opera's built-in AI tool. Whatever web page I'm on, no need to go somewhere else and break my train of thought. I can ask any question that comes to mind when it comes to mind. And if you think that's useful, please group all my YouTube tabs. Hey presto, all my YouTube tabs are grouped into this color-coded tab island, which can be collapsed to save space and expanded again when needed. Tabs are automatically grouped whenever you open one page from another, but you can easily create and organize your own islands, or ask Aria to group them by domain. You can also ask Aria to close or pin tabs, or even to save them as bookmarks. Also integrated into the command line is Aria's writing mode, which can generate, tweak and check any kind of text, and even insert it directly into an input field. While I was preparing this video, I was also shopping around for a new phone. This button in the sidebar moves your conversation with Aria to its dedicated tab, so I could have two separate conversations with Aria without breaking my workflow or mixing up projects, and with Opera's split screen feature, I could see both at the same time. Aria's answers are constantly being upgraded, so if you need information on products or recipe ideas, Aria not only gives you these, but also, thanks to its new multimodal answers, offers you images and links to check out. Opera is completely free, so try all these features by downloading the latest version through my link in the description. The reason jump cuts became absolutely standard on YouTube is, in a word, incompetence. The beauty of YouTube is that it's open to anyone who can press record on their phone. Traditional media have always had strict gatekeeping, severe barriers to entry. My book English After RP has been quite well received, but it took a while to get a publisher. One major publisher rejected it for having the wrong number of words.
Very good. Of course, it seemed to have too many notes.
Of course, the traditional gatekeepers didn't just impose length requirements, etc. Traditional media have been a world of professionalism, standards of style, technical training. One consequence of a relatively open platform is that all kinds of professional conventions can be bypassed, sometimes consciously, but often because the creator just never knew the conventions in the first place. Countless early YouTubers had no training in editing, and this incompetence helped to define what YouTube videos looked like, a style that new creators widely conformed to. Some might be deliberate about using a new non-traditional or even anti-traditional style. Others, like me, don't like jump cuts, but are somewhat hypocritically grateful that you can get away with them because they save so much time and effort. Jump cuts are just part of YouTube's style, even when you have the budget for a full-blown professional production team.
Okay. She passed. She does have plot armor. If it makes you feel better, I'm gonna give you $10,000 for coming in second.
You have 7 days to win $10,000. And obviously, massive shout out to the creator of Squid Game.
In fact, I suspect it's because YouTube has so accustomed everyone to jump cuts that even grand old movie directors can now use them where previously they wouldn't.
There's a jump cut there, which you normally are not supposed to do, but we finally gave up and Marty said just leave it as a jump cut.
Hello? Hello? Joe?
It's far from the first time that something which would traditionally have been considered doing things wrong has established itself as an aesthetic choice. A classic example is electric guitar distortion, which arose all over the place because of limitations and actual malfunctions in the equipment.
A song that some qualify as the first rock and roll recording. Kizart's amp got damaged, he stuffed balls of newspaper into it, and the result was unintentional distortion.
And think about the YouTube fashion for holding microphones. Tom Nicholas spent an enjoyable hour discussing the neo-Dadaist semiotics of this social weapon, but forgot to mention that holding a mic, like not bothering to hide a jump cut, is just a lot less trouble than feeding the damn thing inside your shirt and finding somewhere unobtrusive to attach it. And the development of new ways of doing things through reduced effort, or ignorance of, or indifference towards established conventions is something that happens time and time again in language. Apostrophe S is a marker of possession in the English writing system, so it's hardly surprising that people use it with the pronoun it. But this shows ignorance of or indifference towards an established convention that you just shouldn't do that. And it's the kind of thing that in traditional media would get hacked out by an editor. A less reasonable mistake was to decide that the adjective covert, related to the verb cover, is somehow a negative form of overt and should therefore be pronounced covert. Like cold is the opposite of old, I guess, and the opposite of obese is cobese. If someone who follows an established convention spots someone else breaking it, they can get very upset, but if they're ignorantly making a mistake themselves, that's just fine. And often changes go practically unnoticed, like the reinterpretation of the semantically specific adjective multiple as an all-purpose determiner, which I covered in my last video. And in the rest of this video, I want to focus on two features of English speech that add fascinating expressive power to the language, both of which I've devoted separate videos to, and both of which YouTubers frequently ignore and trample on in ways that I find as jarring as jump cuts. As we'll see, sometimes I actually have to pause, scroll back and listen again to get the meaning. These two features get relatively little attention in English teaching, so on the one hand, non-natives or L2 speakers tend not to use them, and on the other hand, natives tend to be unconscious of them and fascinated when my videos draw their attention to them. And we'll see that, as with jump cuts, there are reasons why YouTubers in particular get them wrong. Both features, interestingly, involve pronouncing words or syllables less prominently, which is precisely how they increase the language's expressive power. These features are weak forms and deaccenting. First, weak forms. Weak forms are function words, some of the most frequent and important ones. But although they're words, they're pronounced more like affixes, usually prefixes, and crucially, they have a major role in expressing important contrasts of meaning. I go into this in great detail in this video, but to summarise, the words on the left here are very commonly pronounced very weakly, which distinguishes them from the words on the right, which are generally pronounced strongly.
I was actually really afraid that
There was one section that didn't give me a standing ovation right there. There.
I'm just thinking if we had footage like that, we had
contributed to 2 global wars,
The Great Fire of London in 1666 lasted for 4 days. For four.
You can run, but you can't hide. You can.
I said there that weak forms have a major role in expressing contrasts of meaning, but in the world of YouTube, it sometimes seems that that should be had a major role. In a recent video, I discussed YouTubers using the strong pronunciation of the indefinite article, a, even before a vowel.
Building an independent creative business.
It is an African-American institution.
I have a original bodice in my collection.
Soul swapping a original 1985 pair.
With a interesting family dynamic.
Voting for president is not an opportunity.
Forms like those are especially common on YouTube, where many speakers have what I call weak form strengthening, namely the increased use of strong forms of words that are more likely to be weak in more conversational speech.
In a famous quote that he might have never actually said.
And some YouTubers seem to use weak forms hardly at all.
He is the author of the brand new book,
AI, but then Genie 2 generating a car going off a cliff. That's not the irony. The irony is that these are obviously state-of-the-art, are less impressive, and Genie 2 will turn it into an interactive world. That video will have to wait. Genie 2, wait.
There are several reasons YouTubers might not bother with weak forms. One is a desire to be clear, punchy, emphatic, attention-grabbing, as if the algorithm just won't notice you if you use weak forms. But strong forms don't simply make things clearer. In my video on the indefinite article, I mentioned the true story of someone ordering a English muffin from room service and receiving a English muffins. Nor does the strong indefinite article make things clearer when the topic is AGI. Sorry, AGI.
I even had a whole video ready going over a bunch of new papers as we inch closer to AGI.
Another reason YouTubers fail to use weak forms is hesitancy. We often use strong forms at the beginning of an utterance or after a pause. Perhaps the most common example is starting an utterance with and. And YouTube speech is often very hesitant, full of little pauses. And every time you hesitate, you increase the likelihood that the following words are going to be strong. This is why, to me, YouTube speech with few weak forms starts to sound like a small kid being made to read aloud by the teacher. And so on to the second feature of English that YouTubers get wrong, which I think is even more interesting. This is deaccenting. The thumbnail on my video on deaccenting showed two classic examples. The first time 007 says Bond, the word is new to the discourse, but the second time it's what we call given information. By default, we put the main accent of a phrase on its last content word, but if that word is given information, English typically de-accentuates or de-accents it. And the main accent shifts onto the last thing that's new, in this case, James.
Bond. James Bond.
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 What would it sound like if 007 said Bond, James Bond? Well, that can happen when Bond is dubbed into Spanish, for example.
Bond. James Bond.
You see, like weak forms, deaccenting is something most other languages don't have. In the other example on the thumbnail, the repeated words are to be. The second time around, they're given information, so the main accent shifts onto what's new, namely not, to be or not to be. And that's how we always quote the line, although in the theatre, actors are always trying to find different ways to say it.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
No.
To be or not.
No, to be or...
To be or not to be. To be or not to be.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
We also have to consider contrast, which can override givenness. This is red wine, but if we're going to talk about these two things, we're likely to accentuate the contrasting words red and white, no matter how often they're repeated. Red wine, white wine, red wine, white wine, etc. Wine isn't being contrasted with anything and will be deaccented throughout. So now let's turn to YouTube. First, an example with a speaker whose first language isn't English. A couple of years back, I needed a new computer and I was curious about the relative merits of these two things. Fortunately, I found a long and carefully detailed video making just this comparison. The host is knowledgeable and engaging, and his L2 English is spectacularly fluent and idiomatic, at a level I couldn't dream of attaining in any L2 language. But Romance languages like Romanian don't have deaccenting. They generally stick the main accent at the end of the phrase, regardless of givenness, regardless of contrast. And throughout the video, I had to keep stopping and scrolling back to check whether some point that had been made was about the MacBook Pro, or the iPad Pro?
The iPad Pro is actually a much better device than the MacBook Pro is. The MacBook Pro simply smokes the iPad Pro. You see, the MacBook Pro was born to be a laptop, while the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, has a full-size keyboard, just like the MacBook Pro does. The iPad Pro, MacBook Pro, the iPad Pro, my MacBook Pro, the iPad Pro, the MacBook Pro, the iPad Pro, Pro, on the other hand, Pro. Take your iPad Pro, take some photos with the iPad Pro, my 2019 15-inch MacBook Pro, more expensive than the 13-inch MacBook Pro.
Now, to be fair, Daniel did occasionally de-accent.
The iPad Pro, the MacBook Pro.
And it was a helpful video. If tech is your thing, do check out his channel. But more importantly for our purposes, should I be pointing out those accenting patterns as wrong when native English-speaking YouTubers so often do the same thing?
Now this is a 2-for-1. We have the linking R and we have the intrusive R.
One of the first things observed about Pluto is its unusual relationship with its moons. Pluto's biggest moon, Charon, orbits very closely to Pluto.
So right now I have the mic set to all directions, which means that no matter if I'm in front of the camera or if I walk over here on the side of the camera, or if I'm right back here behind the camera. A
shitty thumbnail is infinitely better than a generic but good-looking thumbnail.
Generalizing from pre-training data about one type of reasoning to another similar type of reasoning.
I, for example, have been using Blender for 18 years, and I still have not touched some parts of Blender.
Now, am I just showing my age? Do my much younger viewers find examples like those completely normal now? Are you guys happy to order 1 Coke and 1 Diet Coke? That event you're attending, does it run from the 2nd of April to the 4th of April? Do you want that with cream or without cream? As far as I'm aware, de-accenting isn't generally ignored to the extent that I hear all over YouTube, and sometimes things get de-accented that shouldn't be.
This is absolutely not only my favorite phone of the year, this might be my favorite iPhone ever. Not only my favorite phone of the year, this might be my favorite iPhone ever.
It's a straightforward double contrast, 2 pairs of words, each of which needs an accent. Manchester United 2, Liverpool 3. I watch TV rarely, but I watch YouTube often. Not only my favourite phone of the year, but my favourite iPhone ever. You can't de-accent year and ever, they're in contrast.
Not only my favorite phone of the year, this might be my favorite iPhone ever.
It's like Manchester United 2, Liverpool 3. So how does all this happen? Weak form strengthening, accenting given information so that it sounds like it's new or in contrast, and de-accenting words that are in contrast. Well, many YouTubers are operating on the principle that you'll get your message across most effectively to the viewers if you not only separate all the words, but also accentuate all the words. And the holy word iPhone looks so much more important than a little word like ever. Often YouTubers are reading from teleprompters, but very often without the skill and experience of old school news anchors, who also have the benefit of experienced writers feeding the teleprompter with easy to read, natural sounding text. And when videos are filmed in little pieces, not necessarily in the order they'll appear in the video, it's easy to forget the verbal context. Old school movie shoots have a continuity person who, if you're picking up a shot at the end of the day, might have to sidle over to Robert De Niro and gently point out that it's not "I ordered red wine," it has to be "I ordered red wine." No such luxuries in YouTube, and I've no idea how much they care on a Mr. Beast shoot. It takes trouble to get continuity right. It takes trouble to cover a jump cut or discreetly clip on a lavalier mic. Of course, all this may be great for L2 listeners, some of whom may be hoping that YouTube sucks weak forms and de-accenting out of the English language for good. But to the likes of me, it can be tiresome at best and downright confusing at worst. Not that it's always easy to get the accentuation right in a YouTube video. Here's an example from my recent video on American English. Listen to how I accent vowel phonemes both times. Spanish has 5 vowel phonemes, I, U, E, O and A. But now here's the Wikipedia article on Chinese phonology. Standard Chinese can be analysed as having between 2 and 6 vowel phonemes. My intention while reading the 2 Wikipedia examples was to say them as if I were coming to each of them fresh, but saying it that way didn't quite feel right at the time, and when I listen back now, I wish I'd said that Chinese has between 2 and 6 vowel phonemes, making it clear that vowel phonemes was nothing new, and making the contrast with Spanish having 5 of them. But that's a pretty isolated case. I certainly don't do this.
Ambiguity fallacy, genetic fallacy, middle ground fallacy, continuum fallacy, definist fallacy, ecological fallacy, historian's fallacy, moralistic fallacy, nirvana fallacy.
Yes, it's a video explaining dozens of logical fallacies, and the endlessly repeated word fallacy is accented again and again and again. In fact, I'd call this doubly wrong. Not only does fallacy count as given information practically from the start, whereas the different types of fallacy are in contrast with each other, but also these fallacy names are generally compound nouns. I made a whole video about them. And so the main stress should go on the first word anyway. It's ambiguity fallacy, like press conference, YouTube video, production team, length requirements, Lion King, Infinity War. When I saw this fallacy video, it seemed so strange that any person who'd grown up speaking English would keep accenting the word fallacy like this. Except, of course, it isn't a person. As I learned on Reddit, this channel uses an AI voice. In fact, we're told exactly which voice it is, Liam at 11 Labs. So I went to 11 Labs, selected Liam and entered some of the fallacy video's transcript. Sure enough, the repeated word fallacy keeps being accented.
Ambiguity fallacy. It happens when an unclear phrase with multiple definitions is used within the argument. Therefore, it does not support the conclusion. Genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is the act of rejecting or accepting an argument solely on the basis of its origin rather than its content. Middle ground fallacy. It's the fallacy that the truth is always in the middle of two opposites.
I'm very impressed at how lifelike it is, but I find it fascinating that deaccenting, which native speakers usually manipulate without even thinking, is so hard to learn, both for super proficient L2 users and also for AI systems. This is something I find quite widely in artificial text-to-speech. Google Translate gets this example right.
Bond. James Bond.
But given something less familiar,
Lindsay. Jeff Lindsay.
the Google Translate voice has never really got deaccenting. It's a similar story with compound nouns. If the example is well established, okay.
Press conference.
But otherwise, Google Translate struggles.
Phonetics conference.
Of course, AI isn't my area, but I wonder if these English features aren't so hard for AI to learn, so much as something that humans don't know or care about and neglect in the AI training. If there are any AI corporations out there who want to consult me. So now when I'm watching YouTube and I notice a narrator massively failing to deaccent, my first question is whether it's even a real person. Listen to this voice accentuating United States dollars again and again.
The market value of the stock decreased from 770 billion United States dollars to 635 billion United States dollars. Royal Bank of Canada lowered Tesla's target price from 220 United States dollars to 175 United States dollars.
The video description discloses synthetic content, and I found at least one person suspecting that this channel uses an AI voice. If so, it's complete with Southern British intrusive R and very audible inhalations between phrases.
Integrating its production and sales networks in China and Europe.
But I have to say the content of this video is mind-numbingly repetitive, as if someone has hit the make it longer button again and again. And there are many examples of phrasing that seem to me unlikely to have come from even the most incompetent human.
The numbers sound the alarm. 53%, collapse 7%. Losses in 1 day. Mexico continues to say, "We are willing to take short-term losses." Some analysts predict a further decline, saying 53% collapse, maybe it may continue. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Stay tuned. Do not forget to share your views in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, and do not forget to hit the like button. See you in the future, and goodbye.